God hears. Let me say that God definitely hears. Come on here, Daddy. So it reminded me of a story that I heard of this older gentleman. He went to his doctor, and he had obviously he had a hearing problem. The doctor said, "Hey, we've invented these wonderful hearing aids now, and with these wonderful hearing aids, hey, you'll be able to hear out of this world." The doctor said, "Let us get you fitted for one." The older gentleman walked in and he said, "Sure, I'll get fitted for one and I'll be able to hear again like I used to." They fitted him with one of those wonderful hearing aids, put it in his ear, and he was able to hear. He said, "Doc, I can hear everything. Matter of fact, I can hear the nurse talking in the other room." Doc said, "That's great. I'm glad you can do it." Now, he said, "Now you can go home and let your family know how good you can hear." He went home. He's been home about 3 weeks, and Doc said, "Well, come back. Let me see how everything's going, everything's working with him." The older gentleman came back and he sat in the office with the doctor. Doctor said, "Look, how's everything going with your new hearing aid? Are you able to hear everything?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Well, that's great." Then he says, "Any problems?" He says, "No, there's been no problems." And he said, "Well, hey, how did your family handle this great news that you're able to hear so wonderfully now?" The gentleman said, "Well, I haven't told them." The doctor said, "What? Wait a minute. You have not told your family that you can hear wonderfully now." He said, "No, I ain't said a word." He said, "I've just been sitting in my chair listening at all they've been saying." And he said, "I've changed my will 3 times because of everything I've heard." See, the point is that, God hears. And we sometimes think that God doesn't hear us and God is not listening. That somehow, some way it gets past God and God doesn't hear what's going on, but God hears. And so in this text, I want you to see how God hears the pain. First, the pain of this moment that is taking place and what is happening. But let me first set the scene, because I really want you to grab the scene. And unless you understand the scene, you won't really be able to grab what's going on. Now, what we have here is in the hill country of Ephraim, we got 3 people in this scenario. One is Elkanah. Elkanah is the man. He is the man in this situation. But Phinehas and Hannah are his 2 wives. Now, he had married Hannah first. He had married her and he belonged to her. They were married. All of a sudden, Hannah's womb was closed. The Bible says that God closed the womb of Hannah. So in the case, she was not simply barren. It is just simply that God decided to close it. Right. So in this scenario, God had closed the womb of Hannah. Now, Elkanah is married to Hannah. And so in that day, it was considered a scorn upon you that you were not able to have children. Yeah. So in the effort to be able to have children, Elkanah then turns to Hannah, no doubt, and says, "Look, baby, why don't we go and get us someone who can have children for us?" Hannah, no doubt, thought about this for a moment, and she was thinking, we're the talk of the town, we're scorned. Yeah. Well, maybe, okay. It was Elkanah probably brought the idea up. And so they obviously picked someone. Phinehas is the lady they brought into the scenario. Phinehas is now married to Elkanah. So now you have Elkanah, Phinehas, Hannah. Hannah, who cannot have children. Elkanah then goes and has relationships with Phinehas. Phinehas begins to have this litter of children. And when she does, Hannah then is definitely angry about the situation. Not simply because she's having children, because she would be a recipient of this case, but she was angry because Phinehas would then turn to Hannah and say, "Nana, boo, boo. Yeah. You can't have children like me." Yeah. So she would do something along that manner. And so it would irritate Hannah. Yeah. Now, what would irritate her, and then Elkanah tries to make it better. So Elkanah wanted to make it better. How does he do that? He says, "Well, baby, this is what I'm going to do. Baby, since they bothering you like that, when it comes time to go and worship in the house of God, when we go up to Shiloh and we offer sacrifices, here's what I'm going to do. It's time for what they call the peace offering." And he says, "I'm going to just give Phinehas 1 portion. Now, baby, but what I'm going to do to you? I'm I'm going to give you a double portion. Yeah. I'm going to give you twice as much as Venus. Now, you know, when that happened, Venus probably looked across the table and said, I don't know why you're giving her a double portion. Yeah. I got all the kids. Right. We need more over here because she has none, which probably irritated her even more. Now, they're supposed to make their trek to Shiloh. Shiloh is about 15 miles from where they were at. They would have to make this across desert land. They get to Shiloh, everybody has their offering, and now when she shows up, she being Hannah, she is not happy. She's distressed. She's upset. She can't take it. She don't like going to worship service. She don't like showing up at the church because it just simply reminds her of what she doesn't have. Oh, but she shows up anyway. She decides to leave. Elkanah says, hey, baby, ain't I better than 10 kids you could have had? Now, if you look at the text, she responds with no word. It just simply says she jumped up and said, and leaves. She jumps up in verse 9, it says, and she leaves and takes off. And she goes to then Eli. She goes to the temple. Now, I was thinking, well, you said you were better than 10. Her response was, no, you're not. You ain't even equivalent to 1. But she jumps up, she goes to the temple, and she begins to pray and tell all of her business to Eli, who was the priest there. Eli thought she was drunk. She was pouring out her heart before God, praying in distress. And then Eli says, hey, may God have favor upon her. She then leaves. She then goes back home, and she decides before they go home, they stop to worship again. All of a sudden, this is in about verse 19. The worship changes. You can't see that in the text, but we're going to bring it out here in a moment. The worship then changes. There's a shift in the atmosphere of the worship. You can't see that in the text from the way you look at it in the English vernacular, but in the Hebrew, it's a shift. So then the worship changes. She all of a sudden now comes ready to worship. Then it says in the text, about verse 20, says at that point, God all of a sudden remembers her. Not a remembering that God forgets. It's an unfolding remembering. That's the way God does. That's the way it bears out in Hebrew. So God remembers her. When he remembers her, womb was open, the one he closed in verse 7, I think. That womb then opens, and now she has children. One child named Samuel. That child she had promised to God. That child she began to wean, get him off her breast milk, and at that point, the child then would move forward and then be given over to the priest. That's kind of the scenario. And when she decided to give him over to the priest, he would have been about 5 to 6 years old, maybe, somewhere in that stage of life. And she brings a 3-year-old bull, a flower of Ephraim, and I believe it was all that the Bible says, and she brought all of that and her son as the sacrifice unto God. But that's the scene. That's how it's kind of laid out. Now, in this scene, God has to hear two things. One, the pain, two, the prayer. First, the pain. The pain that Hannah had. Now, we all have pain. We all have troubles. Nobody can escape that. Nobody will be able to run from those type of things because all of us are going to have those things in our life. So all of us will have pain and trouble, and sometimes our pain and trouble can be self-inflicted. And sometimes the pain we have can be the cause of someone else. Let me explain. See, the pain of living outside of the will of God and the design of God will always, let me tell you, always create pain and trouble in your life. When you decide that you're going to live outside and contrary to the word of God, you can expect that you're going to have pain in your life. Now, what caused the pain of Hannah? It wasn't Hannah herself that the pain was inflicted. The pain became an infliction from Elkanah. You say, well, how did Elkanah inflict the pain upon Hannah? Because Elkanah decided to take in another wife. There was the problem. Now, God was the one who closed the womb of Hannah. So then Elkanah decides, hey, I'm going to do my own thing, make my own plan. And I'm going to go outside of the design of God, because God never designed, even in the Old Testament, that we would have more than one wife. Now, see, if the design was simply to have one wife, Elkanah broke the design and decided that I'm going to do something different. And the moment he decided to do something different, as the head of the home, he created and brought pain in it. And what he did was bought some baby mama drama. That's all he brought to the house. See, that's what caused it, and all of that things that are happening was simply Elkanah decided to live outside of the design of God. Now, what would then make us decide to live outside of the design of God? And a lot of times it's considered cultural blinders. Because we're raised in a specific culture, and what we begin to see in our culture is that we begin to accept some things, whether or not they're outside of the design of God or not. So some things in our culture, and in every culture, we take them in and we receive them as normal, even though that they are designed against the Word of God. So in their culture, polygamy was normal. It was acceptable. But just because it was acceptable doesn't mean you go and do it.
That's right.
See, what Paul was talking about to the Corinthians, he says, everything is permissible for thee, but not everything is beneficial. So you can do anything and everything you want to do, but everything may not be considered beneficial for your life. Because some of these things may be outside of God's original design. And because Elkanah went outside of that design, see, it created and caused so much pain and trouble in the home. Not only pain for him, but also pain for Hannah. See, it created all of these problems that began to happen. If he had stayed within the design of God and did what God had told him, guess what? God would have blessed him even greater than he was blessed at the moment. It would have been I don't know how God would have opened the womb, but if God wanted Hannah to have a child, it was going to happen, Doc. It was going to happen anyway, anyhow God seemed to call it and design it. But what happened is, Elkanah says, I'm going to do what I want to do, how I want to do it, and I'm going to go outside the original design of God, and because I do, then it creates all of these pain and troubles in the house. Now, we can do certain things because things are permissible for us. Now, for example, drinking, the Bible doesn't say necessarily that you're forbidden to drink. It doesn't say you're forbidden to smoke. It doesn't say you're forbidden to listen to music, watch TV. But guess what? All of those things are permissible. But are all of those things beneficial? And what you have to determine is whether or not some of the things that we have culturally that are acceptable are spiritually beneficial to you. So you've got to determine whether or not TV watching, because you could binge watch, and you can watch a whole bunch of TV, and what it does would take you from your relationship with God. And that means it's pulling you away from reading the Word of God, prayer time with God, and if those things do that, those things are not beneficial in your life. Although they're permissible, they are not beneficial. So what he was saying was, hey, Elkanah decided to create this pain in the life because he decided to go outside the design of God. Now there would come, where is this, the pain? Pain also came in worship. See, she was getting ready to go to the house of God. So it meant Elkanah was at least a man who understood that he needed to go and worship God. So Elkanah at least knew that. And he would go to the house of God. He would bring his family. I was like, Elkanah, that's good. You bring your family to the worship house of God. Elkanah said everybody's going to church. He'd get up and everybody gets out of the house and goes, Elkanah, good job, Elkanah. Now he takes them, but the problem becomes is that every time they would approach worship, Hannah would get distressed. She would be all upset. She wouldn't want to go into the house of worship. She wouldn't want to go to the house of God. Why? Because Phinehas She was doing all she could to irritate Hannah. Right. She was doing everything to tell her, hey, you know what? I get a single portion. They give you two. I don't understand why. Because you don't have children. So all of these things were trying to irritate her. Right. See, some of us, when we come to the house of God, we're upset. We have pain. So when we come into the house of worship, we say, why do I even want to come here? I feel guilty. You see, I feel guilty when I come into ready to worship because your heart is broken. Yeah. And sometimes when we come to God with a broken heart, our bitterness is there. Yeah. And see, when the bitterness is there, we say, I don't get anything. I might as well stay home. We do the same thing Hannah does. We don't want to go worship. It doesn't feel good. I don't want to go to the house of God. I'm bitter. I'm upset. Bitterness begins to flow because the heart is broken. See, and when the heart is broken, in Proverbs 14, it says the bitterness flows from it. He says that's where the bitterness comes out of. And so here we are with this broken heart in front of the altar of God, and the enemy is so happy. Yeah. He's glad because he wants to keep you isolated from the family of God. So he's telling you, go home. You don't need to be here. Separate yourself from them. So he wants to keep you isolated and put you in your prison cell and keep you trapped. Yeah. Because that's where you are. He said, you got the broken heart. Don't come to the house. Don't get refreshed at the house of God. Yeah. So Hannah was approaching because she's got all this pain of bitterness of what's taking place in her house, all the circumstances and trouble in her life. And she's going, I don't want to go to the house of God and worship. Why? I'm hurting. I'm in pain. Have you seen my house in disarray? Yeah. I got baby mama drama. I got her chasing me. Right. It's just too much. Yeah. Why would I want to go? See, even with your broken heart, a broken heart is an open heart. Yes. And see, when you come with your broken heart, you've got to understand that God is the only physician who can heal that. And the great physician is the only one who can mend the hearts that are broken. And when your heart is broken, it's actually wide open, and that then allows God to be able to then work upon that which is broken. Yes, Lord. And see, when you go off and you don't come to the house of God because you're feeling guilty and because you're upset and you're feeling I can't worship God because of my circumstances, right, then it doesn't allow God the opportunity to be able to work on you. Amen. Amen. See, and the other thing is that we understand the pain is personal, but the healing is corporate. Why do I tell you that? Because in Galatians 6:2, Paul tells us to carry the burdens of each other. So you may have your pain, which is personal, but when you come to the house of God, he said that's where the healing takes place. Right. And that healing can be carried on corporately. So when she comes with this broken heart, the enemy is trying to tell her, look, don't go to the house to worship with all of your pain. She's going, it hurts because I need to keep you separated and trapped. Yes. Keep you in your cell. Yes. Because if I do, I can keep you separated from the family of God. Yes. Which is where the healing takes place in the corporate manner. Because Paul says that in Galatians 6:2. Now then also while this heart is broken and the pain's coming in and you don't want to approach, here's the other thing. When you come to worship with this broken heart and bitterness and then allow the physician to begin to work in and the corporate healing beginning to take place, the worship you do changes your perspective. See, what happens is you begin to see the pain in its rightful place. You begin to see the vastness of God and just how small you are. See, when you stand on the mountaintop of worship, you can look down at the valley of pain.
What you say?
And you'll be able to look at it just for a moment, standing on that mountaintop and seeing just how powerful God is. See, the enemy doesn't want her to be able to come and experience this. So when she's sitting there with all of this bitterness, then she's separated herself, trapped in herself, and she's not able then to experience that which God has. My God. And through all of this, see, God still heals your pain. Look at that. She was wondering, no doubt, does God, you even hear me? Right. I mean, Phineas done had 5 kids. Yes. 5 kids. God, that had to be at least 5 years. And if you put the 9 months in between each one, then you're looking at about 10 total. And that's assuming you had them all back to back. Yeah. That would be 10 years. Now she had to be God. God, are you even listening? Right. Are you hearing what's happening? God, God, are you aware? Amen. Now here, she moves. She says, no. I was like, have you been praying, Hannah? No, because I ain't been coming to church. See? So since I wasn't coming to church, I wasn't experiencing the working power of God. But then Hannah also makes an abrupt move. She says, I know God hears my pain, but does God hear my prayer? Yes. And God hears the prayer. Now Hannah takes in verse 9. Now Hannah says, okay, I'm ready now to get to God. I had enough of this pain. I had enough of this suffering, this circumstance. Now I'm ready to get to God. So Hannah does. She says, I'm ready to go and pray. And what provokes her to prayer was verse 8. Elkanah says, hey, am I not better than 10 sons? She jumps up in verse 9. I don't think so, baby. I'm going to go to the house of God. Right there, she jumps up and ready then to approach God in prayer. She moves to approach Him because pain provokes prayer. Pain will provoke prayer each and every place some pain comes. Yes, it will. Oh, it'll provoke and put you on your knee in just a moment's notice. It provokes prayer. And let me tell you something about prayer. See, Hannah then now moves to prayer. Now let me tell you about prayer. I'm going to tell you this. Prayer is powerful. Yes, Lord. It is. Yes, it is. See, it is the most important thing you can do. Now, I'm going to tell you that, and a lot of you will walk out of here and won't even do it. I'm going to tell you what is the key to your life, and you will walk out of here and won't even take the key and open the door. You'll sit there and want to bang on the door, but here's the key. I give you the key. Use the key, open the door. You want to bang on the door, use the key. The key is prayer. Now, let me tell you about it. Prayer is powerful. See, it is the most important thing you can do. Now, look at the audacity of Hannah's prayer. She then approaches of God. Now, she comes to Him in prayer, saying to Him, you are the God. Listen, you are the God who orchestrates every meticulous thing that goes on. You are the God who orders history and every important event that goes on. You are the God who arranges the galaxies and put them in their place. She has the audacity to approach this God, who she's considered the Lord of the Most High, the Lord of hosts, the Lord that has the army of angels at His disposal. Now you're telling me prayer is powerful. She's exhibiting this through her prayer because she's understanding that this is the Lord God of the Most High, who has a legion of angels at His disposal that He can call at any moment. The God who has the audacity to be over the cosmos and reign over them, sovereign over every problem and situation. She approaches this God, the audacity of Hannah, to want to tap into the power of God. Oh, yes, prayer is powerful. Yes, Lord. It is the most important thing you can do. Prayer gives you access to one who arranges the universe, who sits over the cosmos, who has a legion of angels at his disposal and can send them to rescue you at any moment. The same God who can open up the bounties of heaven and pour out the blessings upon you. Don't you understand the power of prayer? It allows you the opportunity to plug into something that is so much greater than anything that we can even imagine, ask, or think. Anything greater that you can even comprehend. Guess what? Prayer allows you to be able to tap into that thing which is greater than that. The audacity of Hannah's prayer. Because prayer is just that powerful. See, but also prayer is life-changing. See, prayer is powerful, but it'll change. In other words, you can't keep going to the Lord in prayer and stay the same.
Now, come on now.
It will change your life. It will shift you and mold you. And if you want to change your life, address your circumstances, deal with your pain, guess what? You can do it through prayer. And that will do it for you. Now, I tell you this, and watch, you'll walk out of here with your pain and never address it through prayer. Won't go to God and tell God about how powerful He is. Now, prayer is simply where we just simply have a talk with God. All we got to do is sit and just simply tell God what's going on in our life, our problems, our issues, our situations. That's all it is. And if we simply take the time to do that, it says that alone right there will change your life. That alone will make your life different. It's not just for the religious.
You're right.
It's for the desperate.
Come on here, man.
See, it is when you get desperate, that's when really prayer starts to really take effect. See, Hannah was desperate. She reached that point of being desperate. I'm ready for God to do something different in my life. And then she began to evoke Him through the power of prayer. See, prayer is not some checklist we simply do. It's not about your form or length or position that you may have. Prayer is not about any of that. It's simply a talk with God where you pour out your heart before God. The Puritans say, they would tell you like this, pray until you pray. That's what they would say. If you are a Puritan, they would say, pray until you pray. You're going, what that mean? He said, you pray until you finally get to the point to where you're pouring out your heart before God. They would say, you don't get up there and pray, oh Lord, how blessed, oh Lord, it's good. No, they say you ain't reached nothing yet. The Puritans would say, you pray until you get ready to pour out what's happening in your life, the circumstance, the issues, and telling God about your sin. He said, that's when you done got to the altar. See, that's when He said you can affect life change. Is when you tell God, look, I don't like it. I'm not happy about it, God. It's hurting my feelings. I don't feel right with everything that's going on. I'm mad at her, God. I want a baby. See, that'll change a life. That's different. That's what the Puritans would say. Pray until you get to the point and you're telling God everything that's on your mind. See, unless prayer is a blessing. You say, well, how then is prayer is a blessing? Well, the blessing is not necessarily what we get.
Amen.
But the blessing is that we're able to connect to the treasure. And the treasure is God.
Yes.
That's the blessing.
That's it.
See, when you're able to connect to the treasure, then that's where you receive the blessing. And see, when you go in prayer and this blessing, what you're doing is making a faith walk. See, when you decide that you're going to tap into the powerful prayer that God has, when you decide I want life change, then you effectively said, I want to align myself up with God. And so when you go to pray, you're saying, I'm going to align myself up with you, God, and that's what I'm intending to do when I sit down upon my knees through the act of prayer. Spurgeon would tell you this. Anything that drives you to God is a blessing. That's what Spurgeon would say. Charles Spurgeon would say anything that would drive you to God to get you to pray, he said that is a blessing. So whatever happens in your life, the circumstances, he said that's a great thing that's happening because it drives you to God in prayer. The problem becomes, if we know prayer is a blessing, the problem becomes our selfishness. We then are selfish and self-sufficient. And being sufficient, we don't need to go to the house of God. We don't need to go to God in prayer.
Talk about it.
And so therefore we miss the blessing that God has.
Talk about it.
God hears your pain. God hears your prayer. He does. And listen with this, God will provide. Now listen what happens to Hannah. God then said, let me handle, let me open up for you. It changes in verse number 19. Because in 19, 1 through 18, she was in her pain, she was doing her prayer, but in 19, it says they got up. Now she had finished praying. The priest had told her, hey, go. May God answer your prayer. But in 19, things changed. She arose early in the morning. See, they arose. And it says right there, they worshiped before the Lord. Now, she had been going to worship and didn't like it before. Now, in verse 19, all of a sudden, she hit a different stride. The worship changed. See, it changed. You know what it is? Sometimes we get enamored in our culture with what's next. See, we get enamored with the next gadget, the next car. We get enamored with what's next, the next software that's rolling out, the phone, the next TV, clothes. And so with that, those things that we get enamored with, it creates the narrative to us. Then that the answer is in life. This is where we find our answer in life and identity and purpose on what's next. And so we get enamored with these things. And so what it does, it creates in our culture that, hey, if you want to know where your life is going, where your purpose is, your identity, find out what's next. And so sometimes we will go and approach God to say, hey, what's next? But in this text, it was a past tense approach. What it means was that she went back to understand who God was. And when you have to sometimes go back into the past to understand who God is and what He's done, and then bring that forward to the present. And when that comes to the present, that is what gives you life, identity, and purpose. Because when you understand that God died upon the cross, then you understand and bring that forward. You understand that's my life.
That's it.
See, when you understand the work that He's done, then you go bring that forward. You understand that's my identity. See, when you understand what He's done in the past, and then you bring that forward to the present, then you understand here's my purpose to let others know about what He's done for us. So then the past effectively comes forward and becomes your present reality. And from that, you then have your purpose, your life, your identity. She then moved to the place where she worshiped and life changed for her. She began to realize the power and the purpose that she has in God. And when she understood that, then now she knows, okay, now I can move forward in life. She said, okay, I know what to do. Life has now given me my direction. Now I can proceed forward. I know what God is going to do with me. And because of that, now she's going, hey, I've discovered what I'm supposed to do. She worshiped from a different perspective. And when she gets through worshiping, the Bible says what happened was in the next verse, he said he opened now the womb and he remembered Hannah. In other words, it was an unfolding of God's purpose. God says, I was going to work with you the whole time, Hannah, but I was waiting for you to be able to understand who I am, what I've done, the power that I have. And because you do now, guess what? I'm unfolding now and remembering what I'm supposed to do in your life. That's the way God works. He unfolds His work within our lives. See, you will remember. God remembers and He doesn't forget. God does not forget. He remembers and He unfolds His plan in our life. And it happens to each of them. It happened to Noah. Hey, it happened in the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Hey, God unfolds his plan. And guess what? He wants to do that in your life too.
Yes, he do.
God wants to unfold his plan in your life. Listen, it happened with Joshua when he crossed the Jordan. Listen, when they got ready to cross the Jordan, what did they do? They put the ark out front. The waters of the Jordan stopped, and then the children of Israel crossed over on dry land. And then when Joshua got to the other side, you know what he did? He commanded, he says, look, go back and get 12 stones. Why would Joshua tell them to go back and get 12 stones? He says, bring them over to the side that we crossed over to and put them there as a remembrance. He says, so that when people come, they will look and see the work of God. And when they see the work of God, it will let them know that they can move forward and conquer the land. Listen, that's the way God works. God's going to provide in your life. But he wants you to remember how great he is, the power that he has, what he can do. Bring that forward in your life. And when you bring that forward, he says, now you're ready for me to unfold my plan in you so that you will have life, identity, and purpose. He says, this is how it happened, and God begins to provide in your life. And look, I'm going to close with this. I'm going to close with what the Bible says. Just chapter 2. It says that God hears your pain, your prayer, and listen, God will provide. But look at chapter 2. Hannah brought her child and weaned him, submitted him to God, and look at what she says in chapter 2. After all of that, then Hannah prayed and said, chapter 2, my heart exalts in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth speaks boldly against my enemies. Why? Because I rejoice in your salvation. It says, there's no one holy like you, Lord. There's no one besides you, Lord. Nor is there any rock like our God. He says, boast no more so very proudly. Do not let arrogance come out of your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and with him actions are weighed. He said, the bows of the mighty are shattered, but the feeble gird on strength. Those who are full hire themselves out for bread, but those who are hungry cease to be hungry. And even the barren gives birth to 7, but she who has many children languishes. The Lord kills, and he makes alive.
Yes, he do.
He brings down the Sheol, and he raises up. The Lord makes poor and rich. He brings low, and he exalts.
Yes, he do.
He raises the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with the nobles and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he set the world on them. He keeps the feet of the godly ones, but the wicked ones they're silenced in darkness. For not by night shall a man prevail. For those who contend with the Lord will be shattered. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth, and he will give strength to his king, and he will exalt the horn of the anointed. That was her prayer. Through her pain, through her prayer, after God has provided, she comes and ends and says, God will exalt you. God will lift you up. God will provide. God will make a way. That's what Hannah said, and we should believe what she said. So if you believe it, say amen.